Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So today I'm arranging things on what I'm using as the cutting table. Now this little table was a table that I repaired from the broken box of furniture that I purchased off eBay. I will leave a link in the description. And right here I'm just trying to give you a close-up of a lovely yardstick that I purchased. I will have to find the vendor that I purchased that from, but it actually has the little lines and numbers on it. It's perfectly scaled. Now this is some little needle and thread, and you see I've got the cutouts from some of the dress pieces. Now I will leave a link in the description for the dress that I actually made previously, and those are some spools of thread. This is a basket of accessories, and those are some buttons. Now all those cards of buttons on the table I made in a previous video, and I will leave a link in the description for that, in addition to those laces on the reels. So I've done quite a bit of work for the sewing room dolls, and I'm just now getting to the part where I'm actually beginning to arrange the items to actually put them in. So, and I hope you dolls don't mind that I play for a little while, because that's the way I work best. You want to place things in a natural way that would correspond with the way your dolls would use things. You want things to look natural. You don't want everything lined up in a row, stacked perfectly, everything put away. That's not real. Now I'm trying to arrange some of these reels of thread and lace so that it looks like maybe they used some, cut it off, left it on the table. Now I will be dampening some of the laces and the ribbons so that they'll take on a draped or hanging look to be more natural on the table and in the scene. So there are quite a few videos that go along with this one because I've been making miniatures for the sewing room and dress shop for quite some time. Now here's a little box I created that I'm filling with more ribbon and trying to place it or arrange it on the side of the little cutting table. It's not going to be very much room to cut anything by the time I add all these accessories, but that's exactly how I want the sewing room to look: full and cluttered, overrun, just excessive. So dolls, I'm just allowing some of this to play because I want you to see my process so for putting things together, or how I come up with my ideas. It's not random. I'm thinking about how the dolls would be working, what they'd be doing. Now this is a little piece of tissue paper, and I used a really fine tip Sharpie to add the little broken lines around the edges. Now when it came to this card that I got from Renee Brandow, I have a video where she gave me quite a few things, and I decided to use it as a swatch board. And if you don't know what a swatch board is, my aunt used to have one where she had patterns and fabric pieces and swatches to just remind her of projects she was working on. And I thought that this item would be the perfect piece to be that little board. Now I'm actually going to put it above the sewing machine that Aunt Bess is working on to make it look as though this is what she uses for her design inspiration. Now after I had started on this project, I realized that I really wanted it to look more like a board or bulletin board rather than a piece of paper. So I took a couple coffee stir sticks and stained them and trimmed off the rounds to the end of the stir sticks, and now I'm gluing it directly to the postcard. I didn't do anything fancy. I just needed it to be something simple to really frame it, to define the existing image so that I could go ahead and add additional articles to really bring out the theme of what I'm trying to do. And I thought it would be a nice piece to kind of anchor the walls of the sewing room, since there won't be like art and pictures and things like that on the wall. Something like this will really anchor and define the space. And I'm planning on hanging it directly in front of Aunt Bess's sewing machine to denote an element of prominence. Since she's the head dressmaker or seamstress, it will just kind of make her feel special. Now, if you're new to the channel, I have a tendency to talk a lot about not liking to measure. And although that is my tendency, there are hazards and consequences to that. And some of the typical consequences are either things are too short or too long, and then you have to compensate for that. So in this instance, I doubled up the piece of coffee stir stick on top of that piece that was a little bit short, one to make it longer or to make it look uniform, And then I realized I wanted to assign that board or that side of the board an additional function, which would be to have a couple hooks to hang things on. So after I added the second layer or the second coffee stir stick to cover up the short one, and then cleaned up the excess glue. And then I went into my little stash of extras and found a couple door hooks. Now these are the same kind that I put on the back doors of the rooming house bedrooms. Now I want you to take note, these are brand new. They're really bright and really brassy, and they will need to be aged and toned down before I use them. And in the midst of working on this board and deciding to add the hooks, I started to realize I probably needed to add hooks to some of the furniture in the dress shop. So let me stay focused on this project before I start on something else. So I got together all the little door hooks that I had, and I figured I should go ahead and just age them all so they'll be ready as I move along throughout the rest of this project. Now while the paint was drying for the door hooks, I did have this other little cabinet that I needed to prepare to use in the sewing room. Now, I really like the little cabinet, but it's just raw wood, not stained or anything. I didn't want to paint it. I just wanted it to look like an old cabinet that had probably been passed down in the family for sewing purposes. Unstained, it just looked too new, so I needed to tone that down. So I added some of my Jacobean stain. I didn't do a lot of distressing or anything on it, dolls, because it's kind of going to be over in the corner. But again, I didn't want it to look too conspicuous with any bright paint or anything like that. So while the little cupboard is drying, I decided to go ahead and started adding accessories to all these sewing machines. Now, dolls, in a previous video, I did upcycle some old sewing machines, and I will leave a link in the description. And there's a little cover. It's kind of just sitting to the side. It's dry, and I will accessorize it, but I'd already started working on the sewing machines, so let me finish them up. Now, when you're trying to accessorize your sewing machines, you just kind of want to pull out everything you've got to determine what pieces you want on each one. Again, you want to be careful not to make everything look too perfect. Now, I did decide to use that piece of fabric, but I am going to do a little bit more to it. But I wanted to add some of the other accessories first. So you see I have the little cut cabinet out as well, because as I worked on the sewing machine, I realized that some of the things that I thought I wanted on the sewing machine, I actually decided to put them on the little cabinet. Now, some of the items I am adding little dabs of glue. And I did that specifically for the tiny spools of thread because they're just too small to conceal the tacky wax. But gluing items to my miniatures is really not my thing. But I have made some exceptions. So dolls, I've got a lot of moving pieces here. I've got spools of thread, buttons, patterns. Now dolls, when you're working at this stage of your project, you literally want to empty your clip and put everything you have out and have it available while you're working. In several previous videos, I made multiples of what I consider to be sewing room essentials. And I realized that I only made a few of the bolts of fabric that were actually small enough to fit in the little cabinet. So that's definitely something you want to keep in mind, dolls, when you're making your accessories. Don't make them oversized. And I did dampen some pieces of fabric to hang on the outsides of the drawers. And you want a lot of variation so that things, again, don't look all matchy-matchy and perfect. And another thing I want you to realize when you're working on a project like this and you are placing your accessories, there is no right or wrong way. It's what you like. It's what you're accustomed to. It's what you're used to seeing or what looks familiar to you. So don't ever let somebody tell you that something doesn't go or it's not right. This is your dollhouse, and it is based on what your personal preference is. Now, although I didn't really want to fill the drawers, I did want to make it look as though there were a lot of things in them. So I did tuck some pieces of fabric that I really wasn't interested in showing, just to tuck them in the back so that you'll see them from a distance. And when you've gotten to this stage of your dollhouse process, there's absolutely no way to do this without playing, because you have to think about the lives of your dolls, what they're doing, how they do things, and what sequence they do things, what their personality type is. So there are a lot of things you have to be thinking about, and you really need to get in that headspace. I always like to think of my rooms, and when I arrange my things, I want it to look as though either somebody just left or they're on their way back. After I was pretty much done with the cabinet, I found a piece of fabric to put on my third sewing machine, and I realized that I really liked the fabrics that I had chosen, but I did want to dampen the fabric to give them more of a drape. And I'm using my water and glue solution to kind of scrunch the fabric up. And actually, I wanted to put two pieces of fabric on this sewing machine. I did add an extra roll of the fabric I made on the dress form to a roll to give the impression of that's where that dress came from. And then I took a moment to just tuck it in with the other things, but I wanted it to be peeking out enough that it would be visible. And then there's the other sewing machine with the two pieces of fabric. It's got patterns on top. And then I dampened the little green rose piece of fabric to make it look a little bit more natural and drapey. Now, I don't want you to be worried about it messing up my wood or anything like that because it's not dripping wet. It was just damp enough to shape. And there's a quick close-up of the bulletin board with the extras I added. And this is the table and the dress. So let's go ahead, dolls, and look at everything inside the sewing room. So here we are, dolls, on the second floor of the Dress Shop Dollhouse. So we've got our sewing machines, we've got our cluttered cutting table, the bolts of fabric. I've added a couple shelves. Now I do still need to do some window treatments and add a light to the room, but I just wanted to let you see how things were and how everything was set up. At this point, now the ladies can at least get to work and working on things to get the dress shop open for Christmas. Now, if you've enjoyed this video today and want to see more video like this, definitely let me know in the comments. Also, like, share, and subscribe. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye-bye now, dolls.